I don't know about you, but for me, among all the scary stories and legends, ghost stories are always the scariest. Hello dear friends, this is Mr. Top F and this is the second part of the video about the 20 scariest ghost legends from around the world. Before we start, subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss new videos on similar topics. And if you will enjoy this episode, don't forget to like it. Get ready to be scared, we start. The Vanishing Hitchhiker. The Vanishing Hitchhiker is a popular ghost story that has been told in various forms for many years across the United States. The basic premise of the story is that a person picks up a hitchhiker on a lonely road, only for the hitchhiker to mysteriously vanish from the car without explanation. Chicago, Illinois is the setting for one of the most famous versions of the Vanishing Hitchhiker story. A man was driving late at night when he noticed a young woman hitchhiking on the side of the road, according to legend. The woman was dressed in a white gown and appeared distressed, so the man pulled over to offer her a ride. The woman got into the car and gave the man an address to take her to, but she became quiet and appeared to be lost in thought as they drove. When they arrived at the address the woman had given, the man turned to her to express his condolences for whatever was bothering her, but she had vanished from the car. Her white dress was the only thing that remained of her, crumpled up on the seat where she had been sitting. Another well-known version of the Vanishing Hitchhiker story is set in California. In this version, a man picks up a female hitchhiker dressed in 1930s attire. She requests to be taken to a nearby cemetery, and as they drive, the woman becomes increasingly depressed. She vanishes from the car as they approach the cemetery, leaving only her clothing behind. The story of the Vanishing Hitchhiker has many variations, but the common themes of a mysterious hitchhiker who vanishes without a trace remain constant. The Greenbrier Ghost. The Greenbrier Ghost is one of the most famous ghost stories in American history, based on a true story that occurred in West Virginia in the late 1800s. The story begins with Zona Hester, a young woman who lived in the small town of Greenbrier with her mother and stepfather. Zona was a lovely lady who quickly piqued the interest of a man named Erasmus Trout Shue, who had recently relocated to Greenbrier. Despite Zona's mother's objections, Zona and Shue married in 1896. The marriage, however, was not a happy one, and rumors spread that Shue was abusive and controlling. Zona was discovered dead in her home in January 1897. Shue claimed she died naturally, but Zona's mother was convinced her daughter had been murdered. Zona's mother insisted that her daughter's death was suspicious and prayed for a sign that would reveal the truth. She claimed that Zona's ghost appeared to her in a dream one night, telling her that Shue had murdered her by breaking her neck. Zona's mother went to the local prosecutor the next day and told him about her dream. Despite his reservations, the prosecutor decided to order an autopsy on Zona's body. During the autopsy, the doctor discovered that Zona's neck had been broken, leading him to believe that she had been murdered. Shue was apprehended and charged with the offense. Zona's mother testified about her dream during the trial, and she persuaded the jury that Shue was guilty. Shue was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to life in prison. The Greenbrier Ghost legend has persisted for over a century and continues to fascinate people to this day. Some believe Zona's ghost visited her mother, while others are skeptical. Regardless, the Greenbrier Ghost story is a chilling reminder of the power of a mother's love and the tenacity of the human spirit. The Grey Lady. The Grey Lady is a ghostly figure who is said to haunt castles, mansions, and other historic buildings throughout the United Kingdom. While the details of the Grey Lady legend vary depending on where you live, some common elements appear in most versions of the story. Longleat House, a stately home in Wiltshire, England, is said to be haunted by one of the most famous Grey Ladies. The Grey Lady is said to be the ghost of Lady Louisa Carteret, who lived at Longleat House in the 18th century. Lady Louisa was said to be a kind and generous woman who was well-liked by the locals. Tragically, she died as a young woman after being diagnosed with tuberculosis. Lady Louisa's spirit is said to have remained at Longleat House after her death, wandering the halls in a great gown and occasionally appearing to visitors or staff. According to some reports, she appears as a misty figure, while others claim she is a more solid presence. Lady Louise's ghost is said to appear to people who are ill or dying, offering them comfort in their final moments in some versions of the story. Tantallon Castle in Scotland is said to be haunted by another famous Grey Lady. The Grey Lady, according to legend, is the ghost of a woman who was murdered by her husband in the castle during the 16th century. Her ghost is said to manifest as a misty figure floating through the castle walls, moaning in sorrow. When people encounter the Grey Lady at Tantallon Castle, they have reported feeling a cold breeze or a sense of sadness. The Grey Lady legend can also be found at Hampton Court Palace, Glamis Castle, and Bisham Abbey in the United Kingdom. The Grey Lady story differs slightly in each location, but the basic elements of a tragic female figure dressed in gray who haunts a historic building remain the same. Overall, the Grey Lady legend is one of the most enduring ghost stories in the United Kingdom, and it continues to captivate the imaginations of people all over the world who are intrigued by the idea of spirits lingering on after death. The Screaming Skulls of Calgarth Hall. The Screaming Skulls of Calgarth Hall is a haunting story set in Cumbria, England, in the early 18th century. According to legend, the Fell family owned the estate of Calgarth Hall, and a young woman named Dorothy was married to the heir, Charles. Charles was known to be a cruel man who frequently abused Dorothy. Dorothy died after falling down a flight of stairs one day. Although Charles was suspected of pushing her, he was never charged with her murder. Strange things began to happen in Calgarth Hall after Dorothy's death. Charles claimed to have heard Dorothy's voice calling to him and that she was haunting him. Charles died a few years later, and it is said that his ghost began to haunt Calgarth Hall as well. But it was Dorothy's ghost who was the most active. She was said to appear in the mansion's hallways and staircases, and her ghostly screams could be heard all night. One of the most well-known stories about the Screaming Skulls of Calgarth Hall involves a servant who discovers a buried skull. She brought it to the estate's owner's attention, who recognized it as Dorothy's skull. He directed that the skull be placed in a room in the mansion and treated with care. Anyone who attempts to remove the skull from the room is said to be cursed by Dorothy's ghost. There have been numerous reports of strange occurrences at Calgarth Hall over the years. Visitors have reported a cold presence in the mansion, and some have claimed to have seen Dorothy's ghostly apparition. Many people believe that the Screaming Skulls are the source of the haunting. They are still on display in the mansion. Calgarth Hall is now a popular tourist destination, with visitors coming from all over the world to hear the haunting story of the Screaming Skulls. Whether or not the legends are true, the tragic deaths of Dorothy and Charles Fell continue to captivate people's imaginations and inspire ghost stories to this day. The Headless Horseman. The Headless Horseman is a legendary figure who has long been a part of American folklore. Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, published in 1820, is the most famous version of the story. The story takes place in the late 18th century in the small town of Sleepy Hollow, New York. The town is famous for its ghost stories, which include the legend of the Headless Horseman. The horseman is said to be the spirit of a Hessian soldier who was decapitated by a cannonball during the American Revolution. His spirit is said to ride through the countryside on horseback, seeking vengeance on anyone who gets in his way. Ichabod Crane, a superstitious schoolteacher in love with a local girl named Katrina Van Tassel, is the story's protagonist. Ichabod meets the Headless Horseman one night on his way back from a party at the Van Tassel estate. The horseman pursues Ichabod through the woods, throwing a pumpkin at him and eventually knocking him off his horse. Ichabod's horse is discovered wandering without its rider the next day, and Ichabod himself is nowhere to be found. Some believe he was murdered by the Headless Horseman, while others believe he fled the town in fear. Over the years, the legend of the Headless Horseman has captivated audiences, inspiring numerous adaptations and retellings. The character has appeared in movies, TV shows, and even a Broadway musical. With his black cloak and headless torso, the horseman's iconic appearance has become a popular Halloween costume, and his story remains a staple of American folklore. Whether or not the Headless Horseman is a real person or a figment of the imagination, his legend is one of the most enduring and terrifying ghost stories in American history. The story of the Demon Nun of Loudun. The Demon Nun of Loudun story takes place in 17th century France, in the town of Loudun, which was controlled by the Catholic Church. An Ursuline convent in town housed a young woman named Sister Jean d'Angers. Sister Jean was the convent's prioress and was known for being devout and pious. Things began to take an unusual turn in 1632 when the town was hit by a wave of demonic possession. Several convent nuns began to exhibit strange behavior, such as convulsions and fits of screaming. The townspeople believed the nuns had been possessed by demons and sought assistance from the church. The church assigned a local priest, Father Urbain Grandier, to investigate the case. Father Grandier was well known for his good looks and charm, and he was said to have a knack for seducing women. Sister Jean fell in love with him, but he did not reciprocate her feelings. Sister Jean seemed to be triggered by this rejection, and she began to accuse Father Grandier of being a sorcerer and having made a pact with the devil. The accusations leveled against Father Grandier were unfounded, but they gained traction among the town's residents, who were already convinced that demonic forces were at work in Loudun. Sister Jean became the accusation's ringleader, and she was joined by other convent nuns. They claimed that Father Grandier struck a deal with the devil and cast spells on the nuns to enslave them. The accusations leveled against Father Grandier became increasingly absurd. The nuns claimed he had transformed into a black dog and flown through the air. They also claimed that they had seen him sexually assaulting them in their dreams. Father Grandier was arrested and tried despite the lack of evidence. The trial was a farce, and Father Grandier was found guilty of sorcery and sentenced to death by burning. He maintained his innocence until the very end on the day of his execution. The demonic possessions in Loudun continued after Father Grandier's death. Sister Jean became increasingly insane, claiming that she was possessed by the demon Asmodeus. She would have convulsions and scream obscenities. The townspeople believed her claims and began to refer to her as the Demon Nun. Sister Jean's possession lasted several years, during which time she became something of a celebrity. People would travel long distances to see her and hear her speak in tongues. However, the possession eventually subsided, and Sister Jean returned to her normal self. Historians and psychologists are still researching the case of the Demon Nun of Loudun today. Some believe Sister Jean had a mental illness, while others believe she was a victim of mass hysteria. Whatever the case, the Demon Nun of Loudun story is a fascinating and terrifying tale of demonic possession and religious fanaticism. The Devil's Tramping Ground. The Devil's Tramping Ground is a mysterious location in Chatham County, North Carolina's forests. It's a 40-foot diameter circle of barren ground surrounded by a ring of trees. The devil himself is said to visit the location at night to pace in a circle, hence the name. According to legend, when the first settlers arrived in the area, they discovered a spot where nothing could grow. Despite efforts to plant crops, the ground remained desolate. Local Native American tribes avoided the area because they believed it was cursed. It was later dubbed the Devil's Tramping Ground. According to legend, the devil himself visits the location every night to pace around in a circle. By morning, anything left inside the circle will have been moved or destroyed. Some people have reported seeing unusual lights or hearing unusual noises coming from the area at night. Many people have attempted to solve the mystery of the Devil's Tramping Ground over the years. Some have attempted to plant trees or crops in the area, only for them to wither and die. Others have attempted to camp or spend the night there, but most have reported feeling uneasy and leaving before the night is done. Many theories have been proposed to explain the phenomenon, ranging from natural explanations like high levels of salt in the soil to supernatural explanations like the presence of evil spirits or the devil himself. Despite numerous attempts to explain it, the Devil's Tramping Ground remains one of North Carolina's most mysterious and eerie locations. The Black Shuck. The Black Shuck is a legendary ghostly dog said to roam the East Anglian countryside, particularly in the English counties of Norfolk and Suffolk. The creature is described as a large black dog with red eyes, sometimes with sulfur or brimstone odor. For centuries, the legend of the Black Shuck has inspired numerous stories and tales. The Black Shuck was first seen in the 16th century, according to legend. Its appearance was thought to be a foreshadowing of death or disaster, and those who encountered it were thought to be cursed or haunted. The creature was said to appear unexpectedly, often on a moonless night, and then vanish. According to some accounts, the Black Shuck could speak and would frequently issue dire warnings to those it encountered. One of the most famous Black Shuck sightings was in 1577 when it is said to have entered a church in Bungay, Suffolk, during a violent storm. The creature, according to reports, killed 2 parishioners and caused the church tower to collapse before disappearing into the night. Another well-known sighting was in 1901 when the Black Shuck was said to have been seen on a coastal road near East Anglia, causing a carriage to overturn and killing the driver. The legend of the Black Shuck has inspired numerous stories and works of art over the years, including the famous novel The Hound of the Baskervilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. The creature is frequently associated with the supernatural and is thought to be related to Celtic and Norse mythology. Despite the legend, some believe the Black Shuck has some basis in reality. Some researchers believe the creature was a large, black dog breed like the Great Dane, which was relatively uncommon in England at the time. Others believe the legend was influenced by other supernatural beliefs and legends in the area. Whatever its origins, the legend of the Black Shuck is still a popular and enduring part of East Anglian folklore. The legend of Bloody Mary. The Bloody Mary legend is one of the most well-known and enduring ghost stories in American folklore. Bloody Mary, according to legend, is a vengeful spirit who appears in mirrors when her name is called 3 times. The legend's origins are unknown, but it is thought to have begun in medieval Europe as a pagan ritual involving chanting and the use of mirrors. The story evolved into the legend of Bloody Mary over time, with different versions of the story emerging in different parts of the world. Bloody Mary, according to the most popular version of the story, is the ghost of a woman who was murdered by her husband or a jealous lover. She is said to haunt the spot where she died, seeking vengeance on anyone who calls her name. Bloody Mary is said to have been a witch or a practitioner of black magic in some versions of the story. Bloody Mary can be summoned by standing in front of a mirror in a dark room and saying her name 3 times. Some versions of the legend call for certain actions, such as lighting a candle or spinning around while chanting her name. Bloody Mary is said to appear in the mirror with her face twisted in rage and her eyes glowing with malice if done correctly. Bloody Mary, according to those who claim to have seen her, is a terrifying figure with blood streaming down her face and a twisted, demonic expression. Some claim to have been physically attacked by the ghost, with scratches appearing on their skin as a result. Bloody Mary's legend has inspired numerous horror films and books, and it remains a popular subject of urban legends and ghost stories. Whether or not Bloody Mary exists, her legend serves as a warning about the perils of summoning dark forces beyond our control. The Ghost of Banquo. The character of the Ghost of Banquo appears in William Shakespeare's play Macbeth. Banquo is a nobleman in the play who is murdered by Macbeth to secure his position as king. Banquo's ghost haunts Macbeth after his death, appearing at a banquet and driving the king insane with guilt. According to legend, Shakespeare's fictional creation, the Ghost of Banquo, is a real ghost who haunts the site of the play's first performance, the Theatre Royal in Drury Lane, London. According to legend, on the opening night of Macbeth at the Theatre Royal in 1664, the actor playing Banquo became ill and had to be replaced at the last minute by another actor. Despite the substitution, the play went on as planned and was a huge success. Strange things began to happen in the theater shortly after the play ended. The actors and stagehands claimed to have seen Banquo's ghost, dressed in full regal regalia, wandering around the theater and staring at them with an eerie gaze. For many years, the Ghost of Banquo haunted the Theatre Royal, with numerous sightings reported by staff and visitors. The ghost is said to have appeared during Macbeth's performances, standing in the wings and watching the actors perform. The Theatre Royal was renovated in the late 18th century, and the area where Banquo's ghost was seen was walled off. This seemed to end the haunting, and the theater was ghost-free for many years. However, in the 20th century, the theater was renovated once more, and the area where Banquo's ghost had been seen was reopened. Sightings of the ghost resumed almost immediately, and staff and visitors continue to report seeing the Ghost of Banquo to this day. Some believe that the ghost is a manifestation of the curse associated with Shakespeare's play Macbeth. According to legend, mentioning the name of the play inside a theater is bad luck, so actors and directors often refer to it as the Scottish play instead. Despite the eerie legend, many people flock to the Theatre Royal to see Macbeth's performances and try to catch a glimpse of the famous Ghost of Banquo. That's all for today. Thank you for watching this episode to the end. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications if you haven't already. Mr. Top F was with you. Bye.